And we are off. It's the Friday show. I've got the executive director of a great organization called Sister District, which works hard to get progressives elected to the state level. LaLa Wu is joining me today. She is smart and passionate and awesome, and I think you will love our conversation that begins at 13 minutes in. But I've got your headlines, and I want to say hello and thank you very much for joining me at last night's hangout, where I hosted it and this from my childhood bedroom in upstate New York, just outside Syracuse, in the country, in the sticks, surrounded by forest woods, as we called it, cornfields, and snow. Feeling blessed going skiing today with 3 generations, my dad, me, and my daughters all together. It's going to be great. Thank you very much for your support. I couldn't do any of it without you, but work a lot Tuesday, work a lot Thursday, play hard, ski with my daughters and my family on Friday and Wednesday, and that's what this week has been looking like, but we've got it all done. Great interview with Steve Cole coming your way next week. You've got to get his new book, The Achilles Trap, all about Saddam Hussein. It's so good, the run up to the war, and I'm really proud of the interview I did with him and looking forward to sharing that with you next week. But let's get to those headlines, shall we? That's why you're here. You want the news, you want some clips, and you want my interview with the very smart LaLa Wu, and I appreciate that you want it all. I'll give it to you. I'll give you all of it right now. Okay, sorry about that. Let's start with the fact that last night, NASA landed on the moon. Not people, but a robot. A lunar landing mission took place last night successfully. It's pretty cool. You don't have to be a space nerd to appreciate this. For the first time since the last Apollo missions in 1972, an American spacecraft reached the surface of the moon last night, a significant step toward NASA's plan to eventually return astronauts to Earth's closest celestial neighbor. Unclear what the orientation of the spacecraft was or if it suffered any damage. The landing was seen as a momentous feat for the growing commercial space sector. After several tense minutes in which ground controllers were unsure about the health of the spacecraft, designed and operated by Houston-based Intuitive Machines, company officials declared it landed successfully and was communicating with Earth. So pretty cool. I'll give you some sound of that coming up, but so much more news to share with you today. The ex-FBI informant charged with lying about the Bidens has been rearrested as prosecutors fight to keep him behind bars. Crazy story unfolding this week. Alexander Smirnov, the former FBI informant indicted for lying about President Joe Biden's family and their alleged dealings in Ukraine, has been rearrested in Nevada. Prosecutors fought to keep him behind bars originally, but he was released by a magistrate judge in Nevada on Tuesday with several conditions, including GPS monitoring and surrender of his 2 passports. Prosecutors asked the Nevada judge to delay his release, but the judge declined. Smirnov was allowed to walk out. Now, his defense lawyers say their client was rearrested Thursday on a new warrant for the exact same charges, this time signed by a federal district judge who will oversee the criminal case, now out of California. Prosecutors allege that Smirnov repeatedly lied to his FBI handler, whom he worked with for over a decade, and should not be trusted. He also has extensive contacts in Russia and elsewhere, prosecutors said, and lied to authorities about his access to over $6 million in liquid funds, more than enough money for him to live comfortably overseas for the rest of his life. All right, well, what else can I tell you? How about this was big news yesterday? An important presidential meeting. The president, Joe Biden, met with the widow of Alexei Navalny, Yulia Navalnaya, and their daughter, Dasha, in California Thursday, less than a week after her husband died in a Russian prison. The meeting was not previously reported and didn't appear on Biden's official White House schedule, but really important way and symbolic gesture of the president, who is really the consoler-in-chief in many ways. Julia Ioffe tweeted, "One presidential candidate makes the killing of Alexei Navalny about himself. The other goes and meets with the grieving family and promises support for their cause." But yeah, they're basically the same, comparing Biden to Trump, of course. I always like to mention when J6ers, insurrectionists, are either arrested or sentenced. And yesterday it was a Minnesota man who repeatedly attacked police officers during the U.S. Capitol riot. He wielded a police baton as a weapon and stole 2 riot shields. He was sentenced on Thursday to nearly 3 years in prison. Brian Mock is his name. Congratulations, Brian. He's a 44-year-old man, helped remove 2 police barricades before he assaulted 4 police officers during the January 6th siege. He shoved one of the officers in the chest and knocked him onto the ground where other riders kicked and hit him. So he is now going to prison for 3 years. Congrats, brother. A federal appeals court panel on Thursday moved to stay a district judge's order that cleared the release of an alleged leader of a white supremacist organization who had previously fled the U.S. to evade prosecution. Robert Rundo, the alleged leader of the white supremacist group Rise Above movement, was released from prison in Orange County Wednesday before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals issued their temporary stay. It was not immediately clear if he'd been located by authorities or placed under arrest. And that is a really important story that I'm going to be following and learning more about. Yesterday in Tennessee, their right-wing governor, Bill Lee, Republican, signed a bill allowing public officials to refuse to perform same-sex marriages. I don't understand. State lawmakers approved this bill last week. The legislation states people shall not be required to solemnize a marriage if they refuse to do so based on their conscience or religious beliefs. The bill doesn't allow officials to deny marriage license to couples based on their beliefs, but prevents officials from being required to solemnize a marriage. Of course, this is the governor who was in the spotlight last year after signing a bill that became the first in the nation to restriction on drag performances and ban gender-affirming health care for transgender youth. A federal judge later ruled that the restrictions on drag shows were unconstitutional. Anyway, Tennessee Republicans argue that the bill was not meant to discriminate against same-sex couples or prevent them from getting married. The bill's primary sponsor in the Senate said that the bill has nothing to do with getting a license. So it's a ridiculous gesture, and I'm going to follow and see if that's constitutional as well. And remember this one, a federal judge is now giving MyPillow founder and election denier Mike Lindell 30 days to pay a $5 million arbitration award for losing his Prove Mike Wrong 2020 election charge. Really hilarious. NBC News reporting this. Lindell said in a phone interview that his company that put on the event, not him personally, but that it's strapped for cash. He said that while his pillow company is doing fine, I don't have the money. I have a pickup truck and a house that I live in. That's it. So, all right, that's great. Mike Lindell, congratulations. He seems to be doing really well. And I guess this is a big story, but my family wasn't affected by it, so maybe it wasn't as big to me. But I saw a lot of you talking about this big outage yesterday. FBI and Homeland Security urgently investigated whether AT&T outage was a cyber attack, as security expert is reporting to some news sources. Thousands of Americans were without cell service for hours. AT&T says it's now fully restored cell phone service to tens of thousands of customers in cities across the country whose phones lost signals overnight, causing frustration and concern about disruptions to 911 dispatches. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby also referred to the outage, and he addressed reporters on Thursday. He said the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security were looking into the outage. He said the FCC was also in touch with AT&T, but the bottom line is we don't have any answers right now. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agreed yesterday to send Israeli negotiators to Paris on Friday for talks with CIA Director Bill Burns, the Qatari Prime Minister and Egyptian spy chief, on a new hostage deal. An Israeli official and source with direct knowledge telling reporters at Axios the decision follows external pressure from the Biden administration and internal pressure from some members of Netanyahu's war cabinet and the leadership of Israel's defense establishment and intelligence community. We'll see what happens with that. A new report says only half of TikTok users actually post on the platform, and I read that story only to tell you to follow me on TikTok at Pete.Dominic. But the top 25% of TikTok users produce 98% of the public videos found on the platform, according to a report from the Pew Research Center. Again, that's Pete.Dominic, and follow me on the TikTok. It's a lot of fun. And also a Chinese spy agency. Substack now says it has more than 3 million paid subscriptions, which is why I need to launch my Substack newsletter called Sit Down with Pete Dominic. I'm really doing that. It's just been on the shelf, but hopefully I'll get that off the ground pretty soon, where I'll have more thoughtful, intimate conversations with people about surviving and thriving on this journey that we call life and together. Sit Down with Pete Dominic is coming soon on Substack. And how about this statistic? More than 4 in 10 Americans now personally know someone who has died of a drug overdose. An estimated 13% of the population have had their lives disrupted as a result, according to a new study in the American Journal of Public Health. And I have my hand up as one of those people. And I'm sure many of you do as well. And more fallout over that Alabama Supreme Court ruling that frozen embryos are children, creating new legal murkiness around in vitro fertilization and a whole bunch of jokes and observations about this. The ruling, the first time a court has recognized frozen embryos as human beings, and a lot of people on social media sharing broken eggs and eggs in car seats and other things with eggs. It's a pretty crazy story and really hard to understand how they got there. But apparently the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is a very far-right religious conspiracy theorist. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, during a recent interview with a QAnon conspiracy theorist, the Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice indicated that he's a proponent of the Seven Mountain Mandate, which calls on Christians to impose fundamentalist values on all aspects of American life. That is the Supreme Court Chief Justice of Alabama. So certainly plenty to be concerned about that there. Eggs are humans coming to a red state near you. All right. Well, those are your headlines, and I guess I misjudged my time again. I'm not going to be able to get to audio and sound. I'll get back on that for Monday's show and next week as on the regular rule, but it's been a weird week schedule-wise, and I have got to get to my girls because it's a family day, as I told you earlier. All right. Well, there you have it. Those are your headlines, and now it's time to get to my guest, who I'm real happy to welcome back to the show. She's been on before, and I'm real happy to have her back because she and her organization do great work. Sister District is an amazing nonprofit organization with over 70,000 volunteers across the nation, one of the largest, most effective progressive grassroots organizations in the country. They build progressive power, help Democrats get elected to swing states in places like Arizona, Michigan, North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Texas. And if you want to support them in person, you can go to our friend Jim Babowski's house on March 7th. Again, if anybody is in or around Northern California, well, 16-year listener Jim Babowski in his home in the San Francisco Bay Area, he is hosting a fundraiser supporting Democratic races featuring NBC political analyst and the author of a really interesting book called Trumpism, Bigotry, and the Threat to American Democracy. Larry Gersten will be the special guest. Drinks, a little food, smart folks listen to the talk, and any stand-up listener who attends will receive a special gift from Jim. So if anybody wants to go, you can see the chalk line where I fell limp after listener Dustin Barnett nearly decapitated me with a very hard pass of a ball at me. We talked about it and actually watched the video at last night's hangout. You missed it. But if you want to contact Jim and go to this event, I will definitely hook it up. If anybody is in Northern California, again, that is March 7th in San Francisco Bay Area, San Mateo to be specific. Contact me now, standupwithpete@gmail.com. She's the co-founder now and executive director of Sister District, the first woman of color to take helm of the organization. She was, in her previous role, the director of engagement and partnerships. She's a lawyer, clerked for federal judges in Northern District of California, also was an attorney in private practice. She's been involved in renewable energy and sustainability initiatives in the past. She serves on the boards of AAPI Victory Alliance, Emerging Voters Together San Francisco, and the Advisory Board of Asian American Women's Political Initiative. We're really excited to have her back on the show. Real smart, passionate, and awesome. It's time for my conversation with LaLa Wu right now. There she is. She's back, and it's been way too long, but I'm really excited to talk to you to talk about the work you guys are doing. Are you now the executive director? You're the head honcho at Sister District.
Yes, that's right.
Very cool. And you have a family. You're doing it all, LaLa. I appreciate you spending some time with me.
Moments before I hopped on with you, I was making my daughter a peanut butter sandwich for breakfast.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Well, that sounds healthy. Any other pets in the home that we are also taking care of?
No pets right now. No pets, just a human pet.
Well, exciting. I think I talked to you right before you became a mom. So that's very, very exciting, but also is obviously the work that you're doing throughout all of it. And I want to get right to it, but just tell us where on the calendar we are. It is February as we're talking. You've got a big event coming up that I asked you about, but obviously we're during the primaries in most states. So how do you tell us where in the calendar year we are for the upcoming elections?
Yeah. Yes. And we do have primaries coming up, but even before that, we've got filing deadlines coming up. And so where we are at Sister District is we are surveying the field, looking at our portfolio of states where we can flip a chamber, hold a chamber, or make inroads into badly gerrymandered states. And we're digging into the districts using quantitative and qualitative analysis to really understand what the field looks like, where these candidates and where these districts are. And so what we do at Sister District, we don't endorse in primaries, but we can endorse after filing deadlines pass, because that means we know whether somebody has a primary challenger or not. So we'll do a first round of endorsements in April and then another after some primaries pass in June or July.
Go ahead and make the case, LaLa, that people just don't seem to always understand about how important state races and state legislatures are. And there's just so many ways to make this case, but that's really the bulk of what you guys are doing. So go ahead.
Oh, let me count the ways. There's so many ways in which state legislatures are important and have such an outsized impact. And so the first is about policy, that they have this outsized impact on every issue that we care about, from abortion to guns to climate to education to democracy itself. The Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade is just one example of the devolution of power to the states. More of that is coming. If you follow, Supreme Court news, there's only going to be more and more power given to the states. So we need to be prepared for that. Second, yes.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. Second is about the leadership pipeline. So today's state leaders are tomorrow's national leaders, our congresspeople, our senators, our presidents. Third is about gerrymandering and redistricting. In most states, it's the state legislatures that control redistricting, which determine the extent of gerrymandering and whether or not we're going to live in a truly fair and representative democracy. And also, they're an amazing deal. Everybody loves a deal, right? And for the fraction of the cost of an congressional race, you can help to elect somebody who's really going to be making policy that impacts people's lives the most.
Well done. Very well done. So important, especially that last one. But gerrymandering is something that happens at the state district, but so do so many other policies that affect your daily life. And I don't think I've ever asked you this, but I just want to get your take on statewide media. There's very little local journalism. There's not like a state channel that covers, in my state of New York, Albany, the capital, what's happening in the state house. And there's for a lot of reasons about that. They're not that profitable, obviously, or else there would be. But, we're always paying attention to the story of the day that's getting sensationalized on cable news and then rebroadcast on all the different tributaries and talked about and examined online, podcasts and YouTube and so on. But there really isn't a lot of attention being paid to what happens at the state level. How do people know the case that you just made and why it's so important? Because in my town right now, listeners know that the fight is at my school district. It's at the school board meetings. It's on Facebook. That's hyper local. And it's the most important thing in my life and that I'm most active on. But there's no coverage of that. So how do people know what's happening in their state, much less their town?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And unfortunately, this coverage is very hard to get, and you have to seek it out. You can't be a passive observer and get all of the information that you need. So you do need to look for it. But it does exist. Despite the decline of local journalism, there is a bit of a resurgence that I've seen happening, because of the interest that people are beginning to pay to state and local. But, you make a really good point, and it's one that we have seized on as Sister District as well, which is that people not only don't pay as much attention to state and local, but with state in particular, it's really at the bottom of the list, because people think to themselves, okay, federal is the most important. If I pay attention to anything, I'll pay attention to that. And then you know who your mayor is. That's something that's like a familiar thing to you. So you understand local politics. But then state, it sort of falls into this weird, other world that is a little bit too abstract. And so people often don't engage there. But it's actually where so much important stuff happens.
I feel like part of that is just because state legislatures aren't always they're not in session, meaning news isn't being made, laws aren't being passed or prevented. But you've always got, I mean, I don't know, I always think of Texas because I feel like headlines come out of that state all the time because you've always got the courts and, the state's attorney general. You could look at New York and Tish James, who a lot of people know. You could look at that creep in Texas who should be in jail, I think. But the bottom line is there is news coming out of states even when they're out of session, when the legislature is not in session, which it isn't a lot of the time in many states, right?
Exactly. That is true. But but you're exactly right. Spoken like somebody with a real journalistic,
Thank you.
But there is so much news that does happen all year round. And what we've started to realize as Sister District is that there needs to be a national effort to get people to engage at the state level, voters, volunteers, just general observers. And so we have actually a newer storytelling and narrative project about the power and promise of states. And so we did a really cool partnership with Teen Vogue, for example, that we just wrapped up. You can check it out to highlight historic firsts in state legislatures. So helping to highlight not just the importance of this level of government, but also the importance of representation and diversity, and having new voices represent us at this level.
That sounds really cool. I can't wait till my internet history is littered with Teen Vogue hits. But hey, I was looking at the outreach, I think is what it sounds like, obviously why it's in that media outlet, Teen Vogue, to young folks. So why don't we just go there and tell us how important it has been and what you've seen in your time working at Sister District and in these state legislatures, how young people, I mean, I always have this bias that what young people should be making the policies because they're the ones that are going to be most affected by them in 5, 10, 20 years. It's always so weird when the oldest people are deciding what's going to happen on the planet when they're going to be gone in like a week because life is not that. I mean, it's a blink lifetime, no matter how old you are. So talk to me about your initiatives and just kind of what your thoughts are about getting young people engaged to run, much less to support another young person's run.
Yes. Young people are so important. I could not agree with you more. And we have to not ignore them, but we have to embrace and, realize how powerful they are and also listen to them. And, so I think one thing that has been very striking about this presidential race is that it's a rematch that some people are not very excited about. So look, rightly or wrongly, we don't need to get into that. But the fact of the matter is that there are a lot of people and young people that are not super excited about it, whether it's right or wrong, right? But we think that there's a different way at Sister District to energize people to get out to the polls, which we have to do because this election is existential. And that is to focus on these down ballot candidates, these state school board races, these state legislative races, these mayor's races. These have candidates can be so dynamic and so engaging and talk about things that are so concrete to their constituents. This is a way that we can really, I think, energize people. And then there's this reverse coattails effect where if you get somebody to turn out for their school board race or their state legislative race, they're going to vote all the way up the ticket.
Yeah. Well, it's so important, as you just said, and hopefully that's an effective strategy because, just put something that young people care about on a referendum. Obviously, people always talk about weed because it's easy, but I think the more important one right now would be women's reproductive rights. How much I feel like every pundit should start and end there with what's most animating voters, but correct me where I'm wrong.
Abortion is extremely animating, and I think there was a concern that after Dobbs came out that it would be a spike of activism and energy, and then people would forget about it, it would fall away. But that's clearly not happened, and it's because this issue is continuing to impact people's lives every single day. Everybody knows somebody who has had an abortion, who might need an abortion, who cares about somebody who is in one of these situations. I mean, it's just such a far-reaching and popular policy to have safe access to abortion that it is incredible. And the proof is in the pudding in terms of electorally. We can see not just the Democrats' winning streak almost every single special election that's happened since Dobbs came out, but then also the midterms where it cannot be overstated, like what a historic accomplishment the midterms were.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's going to be the case because as you said, it's not going away. And it's not going away. Like you hear a headline like 2 days ago from the Alabama Supreme Court that frozen embryos are now considered lives and treated with the same rights as lives, and then quoting the Bible, I think, in their decision. And it's really scary that we're here in Gilead. But the point is, these headlines aren't going away. You hear about a woman who can't get an abortion in Texas, or, these campaign ads that we saw, the young girl that was raped and she's 10 years old and she's talking to camera. These news items, these court decisions keep bringing up and reminding women and the rest of us that this is a thing and it's getting worse. What's next? They're coming for condoms and birth control and you name it. So just say a word about what you're hearing and seeing, how these things it's not a drip, drip, drip. It's I should have used different figures of speech to talk about it, but it's a lot. It's a flood.
Absolutely. And this is exactly what we were concerned about when we saw that Dobbs was going to be coming down the way that it did and overturning Roe versus Wade, that they're going to come for abortion first, but then we knew that they were going to come for IVF next, and contraception, and the list just goes on and on and on. And this fight over women's and people's bodies in general, it's unbelievable. I think that what we are seeing, as I said earlier, is really this continual devolution of power from this arch-conservative Supreme Court, which, by the way, Republicans intentionally built over the past 50 years. They had a very concrete and strong strategy to be building the Supreme Court in this way, simultaneously to building their power in state legislatures so that this power could go back to the states. States could decide for themselves and they could gerrymander and they could do extremist policies. And this, and then, Trump came along and now this slide toward autocracy is really, really quickening. So it's incredibly important that we elect Joe Biden this year.
I realize I'm talking to someone who has a toddler at home, and I should have asked you before I hit record, but I wonder what it was like for you, who is intimate with policy details, having gone through a pregnancy yourself, while you're watching rights be torn away from other women, younger than you, your age, or a little older, whatever. What was that like for you? Do you mind me asking that?
No, not at all. And in fact, I'll share a little story, which is that when my daughter's name is Zelda, when she was about 8 months old, I took her to her first protest. And it was the Bands Off Our Bodies protest in San Francisco right after the leak happened. And I was furious that we had to be there at all, obviously, but I was also really proud to be there with her, to be there with Sister District, San Francisco volunteers. And we were marching together up Market Street, which is in, downtown San Francisco. And if you know the city, we were ending at the Ferry Building. And it was a gorgeous day. I mean, the bay was glittering in the background, perfect temperature. And we were winding down. I was thinking about, sitting down, getting somewhere to have a drink, get a sip of water. And then I saw a sign that just stopped me in my tracks. And the sign said, "I marched with my mother. I never imagined I'd have to march with my daughter." And I just, it really just reminded me, and I think about that sign a lot, that progress isn't linear, that we're going to have setbacks. Some of them are going to be very large. But we have to pick ourselves up and keep moving forward, that we have to learn from our setbacks. We have to celebrate our successes like we've had recently in Virginia and the midterms, in Ohio and Kentucky and Pennsylvania. And we have to do all of this together, though we don't have time to do this separately. And we can't be on defense. We need to be on offense. We need to be working together. And that way we can move forward. So that's something that I think about a lot, and the process that I was going through when all of this happened.
I really appreciate you sharing that with me. That was very powerful. Talk to me about some of the wins that do keep you going. Every time there's a shooting, you'll hear people, which is every day, you'll hear caring, thoughtful people say nothing will ever change, nothing changes, and say legislators do nothing. But it's so not true. And it's such a disservice to the activists in every state, chapters of Mom's Demand and March for Our Lives and Brady and people in Sister District that you've helped get elected, making actual laws change. And just because there is a shooting doesn't mean another one wasn't prevented, a suicide, a homicide, an accident, because of laws that were passed as a result of Sister District endorsed candidates getting elected and voting. I ask you about guns, but you could pick any issue or law to explain the wins and what we've been able to accomplish.
Look, nothing changes until it does. And we just have to keep fighting and keep trucking and persevering in the face of really challenging circumstances. But there are some amazing wins. And I can just give one example that in Michigan, for example, in 2022, Sister District and many others helped to secure a Democratic trifecta for the first time in over 30 years. And with this power, Governor Whitmer was able to lead the legislature to pass a raft of meaningful gun safety legislation. Now, it's not done, but these are some really powerful things, including safe storage laws, waiting periods, these kinds of measures that make a difference and that save lives. And do we need much more? Do we need this across the country? Yes, absolutely. But we just have to keep at it. And it's been incredible to see the successes that we've been able to have with Democratic control of these chambers.
And it's worth mentioning that at the congressional level, the U.S. Congress, the House has passed when Democrats have been in charge, all kinds of laws that Democratic presidents, including Obama, would have signed. It's just it doesn't get through the Senate. But it's worth mentioning and leads us to probably the final issue, which is gerrymandering, redistricting. Let's try it this way, LaLa. Okay, let's say, those words just bore the hell out of people. I mean, I have guests on that specialize on it. They've written books about it, but it's tough sometimes for people to understand. So from your point of view, organizing at the grassroots level to get progressives elected at the state level, talk about a state or an initiative where you've seen this change. It seems like if you pay close attention, Wisconsin, big news out of Wisconsin a couple of days ago. There's news coming out of different states, my state of New York not too long ago as well. Pick a state or pick an example to illustrate why this matters so much and how it goes one way and then the other way. And it's confusing and tough to follow.
Yeah, we have to talk about Wisconsin. Wisconsin, the news out of Wisconsin is truly historic. And Wisconsin had some of the worst gerrymandered maps in the country, if not the worst. And it meant that this truly purple state, that where statewide races have margins of, a few thousand votes kind of thing, we have a state legislature and a congressional delegation that is extremely weighted towards, that's vast majority, if not supermajority, Republican. And this is completely unfair. It means that the representatives of the citizens, of the people of Wisconsin, are not they don't reflect the populace. And so the Wisconsin new maps are absolutely historic. They were enabled by the election of Judge Protasewicz and a special election in April of last year, or not a special election, but an election of April of last year. And incredibly important. Whereas before it was impossible. There's a kind of thing, you can organize your way out of certain kinds of voter suppression. They make it harder to vote. They take away your ballot. Yeah. The drop boxes, et cetera. You can't organize your way out of gerrymandering.
Right.
You just can't. The maps are drawn in such a way that it is impossible for there to be a fair fight, and that's just not what this country should be about or is about. And so the fact that we were able to get a liberal justice onto the Supreme Court to challenge the challenge to the maps was brought. It was heard, and it resulted in the maps that we have now. We have a generational opportunity to actually flip the Wisconsin House now, which was previously a seat away from supermajority, Republican supermajority, Crazy. And then incredible. Yeah. And then and then incredible progress we made in the state Senate as well. Wisconsin Assembly. My apologies. So the Wisconsin Senate that is an inroads opportunity because only half the Senate is up this year. So we'll be able to make some progress and then flip it next cycle. But it's very, very,
that's awesome.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. That's a really good story. I'm old enough to remember, what's his name? Scott. I guess I don't remember his last name, who was the governor of Wisconsin. And I couldn't believe how things had turned in terms of organized labor there. And isn't Paul Ryan from there as well? And it's just a lot has changed in Wisconsin. And it's a perfect place to look at. All right, I'll let you go, but not before you tell us about the State Bridges program you guys have coming up. And of course, very excited that our friend, longtime listener, Jim Babowski is going to be hosting his event in Northern California on March 5th. And I'll tell people more about that if they want to go there. But what is this virtual event?
Yes. So we've got a really awesome virtual event coming up that's part of our State Bridges program. And State Bridges is where we partner with community-based organizations on the ground in the states where we support candidates, and we raise money and attention for them all year round. And so this is something that we do because we understand that the work of electing candidates and of building power doesn't happen just when an election is imminent, but also all year round. And these are the organizations that are led by women, people of color, young people, and laying the foundation, talking to voters all year round so we can get those electoral flips that we so want to see. So our next event is coming up on March 13th. Check it out, State Bridges. We are supporting some incredible organizations, and we would absolutely love to see you there. The next event coming up is supporting organizations in Arizona and in Pennsylvania, Lucha, Raza, Pennsylvania Stands Up, and Pennsylvania United.
There you go. How about that? If you're in Arizona or Pennsylvania especially. But I think what I heard you say is you're expecting a lot of stand-up with Pete Dominick listeners to show up at that event. LaLa.
I better. That's right.
I really appreciate your time, and it makes me, and I'm sure others, comforted hearing from you, knowing that there's awesome people like you and your colleagues, who I've also talked to Gabby there as well. Tell her I said hi, running this amazing organization. So when you're feeling down, you can think about all these awesome people doing the work and then get back up and join the fight. LaLa, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, there you have it. That is it. And that is what I've got for you this week. Doesn't look like I'll be able to get anything out this weekend. I'll get back to posting on Saturdays, hopefully next week, and getting Christian and Ophira, or one of them at least, on, and getting Mara Quint back on. Some of our favorite regulars will be joining me again next week. You guys have been amazing and so kind and thoughtful and generous this week. Thank you very much for those of you who signed up for paid subscriptions or even upgraded your subscription, decided to pay more. You can always pay a couple bucks more a month. It makes a huge difference. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominick. And I hope to see you in Vegas, March 22nd and March 23rd at PodJam. You can get tickets for that and the show links. And that's it. That's all. I will talk to you next week. You guys are amazing. Love you. Bye-bye. John Carroll taking us out.
Keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in. With change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and